Good evening, and thank you, Madam President. First, I would like to extend my respect and admiration for Senator Winfield's passion and trying to put together a bill that will help us move forward. I rise today as someone who stands steadfast against racism, as somebody who supports reform, but reform that is positive and reform that is strengthening, not reform that tries to mask itself in that way, but really vilifies. I also do not believe that Americans, or the congregations of Americans, should be judged by the actions of a few. Policing, for me, be it the nation's first and finest, the Connecticut State Police, or our local departments, this state senator here values and supports you. I support your mission, I support your families, and please know, if you're watching, that the majority of the folks in the state of Connecticut overwhelmingly support you, and they have serious concerns about the inflammatory rhetoric and conversations directed at good people for the actions of a few. This bill, although well-intended, as we've heard tonight, failed to go through the regular process that we have, where many committees could vet it, where we had a full public hearing, and where all those concerned and impacted had an opportunity to come in public and have their voices heard. As you've heard other senators speak to, we are in the middle of a pandemic. There is no reason that this bill could not have been gone through the regular process, been fully vetted, and been heard as we come back in the next legislative session. That concerns me gravely as to what the rush is to push this legislation through. We have heard people, both supportive and not supportive of this bill, bring up serious issues within the bill, but yet we are going to go ahead and push this through and pass it, and then say we'll come back later and fix what we may have missed. For me, that is not good legislation. Everything should be thoroughly vetted. We should have an opportunity for each committee to hear it, to make the changes that need to be made, and make sure that we have a fully crafted and the most thorough legislation that we can have before we vote on it. My biggest issue with this bill, although there are many good points within it, is the qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is just that. It's qualified immunity. It is not just immunity. And it allows for a two-prong legal test. This immunity currently extends to your town clerks, your sanitation workers, and yes, us as legislators. Qualified immunity serves as a screening process for frivolous lawsuits, lawsuits that have no merit. When an officer is arrested and charged criminally, they have violated their constitutional rights, and therefore they are not entitled to qualified immunity. Officers who violate constitutional rights lose their immunity. Qualified immunity does not protect bad officers. If qualified immunity stays in this bill as written, the screening process is gone. It's thrown out the door. Countless lawsuits will be filed, and there is a huge unfunded mandate that will be pushed down to the municipalities. As a former mayor with limited budgets, your choices will be cut your school budget, cut your officers, and in essence, this bill, although maybe not intended, is a way to defund our police system. Bad officers who commit violations are arrested, and they are offered no immunity. No one wants bad cops gone and out of a police department more than good cops. This bill, whether unintended or intended, hurts good officers. The officers that encounter our public every day and risk their lives. Removing qualified immunity does not increase accountability. Bad cops are still arrested and prosecuted. This bill hurts good cops. Unlike the narrative that you have heard, that this is just inserting federal language, that is a gross mischaracterization of the facts in this bill. This bill will take good cops and police away from their communities, away from protecting families, away from arresting criminals, away from mentoring youth, away from preventing future crimes, and it will put them in the courtroom, constantly having to defend themselves for frivolous lawsuits and enforcing the laws that we create right here in this chamber. I grew up with parents that taught me to respect police officers, to respect firemen, to respect those who protect us. I support my local police and my state police. They protect us, they serve us, they help us every day. It is time that we support them. We have heard over and over, 99% of our officers are good. This bill hurts them. We have heard it. You have seen the emails, the hundreds and hundreds of emails, the Chiefs Association, individual officers. While the focus of this bill has been brought about by the egregious and unimaginable actions that we saw in Minneapolis with the murder of George Floyd, I have yet to meet one Connecticut cop who does not condemn these actions, who is not outraged, and who does not want to see justice brought against those officers who were involved. In my hometown in Groton, my chief and my sergeant just recently risked their lives to save a woman's life who went into the Thames River in a car. They risk their lives every day to save another. And when I needed help, when there was a disabled veteran living behind a hotel, the two of them came with me, found him, clothed him, fed him. We are forgetting that police officers have a great sense of humanity. All we've heard are the bad stories of the 1%. We're not hearing the good stories of the 99%. I also want to talk to you about another officer that I had a long conversation with. She lives in my district, and she works in a city. She's married to her wife, Lisa, and she has a disabled child who's in her 20s. She's almost 60 years old, and she's worked for the police department for quite some time. She tells me a story about how she has become such an integral part of her community that one day in particular, she was sitting at a Dunkin' Donuts at 4:30 in the morning working an overtime shift, just about to sip her iced coffee. And as she looked out the window, she saw a young 5-year-old black child running towards her. She went outside, she dropped her coffee, and she realized how distressed this young child was. She put the child in her cruiser, cleared things off of the paperwork off of the seat, and learned that this child was so upset because he had woken up and he couldn't find his mother. He thought something had happened to his mother. At that time, she didn't realize that the mother was a victim of domestic violence, and this child thought his mother had been killed. She put him in the car, they figured out where the child lived, they arrived at the house, they knocked on the door, and what had happened was the babysitter fell asleep with a blanket over her head, and the mother was sleeping with another child in another room. So the young boy got up and he panicked and ran. If she wasn't there at that moment and didn't have the relationship, she is, to this day, does not know what would have happened to that child. There was no charges filed, there was no DCF. It was one of those things that could happen to anybody. But if she hadn't been there and hadn't had that relationship, we don't know what would have happened to that child. Another story about her quickly, because this was really poignant for me. She talked about being called to a Walgreens where someone was being arrested because they had shoplifted. Again, it was a black man living in the city. She walked in. The owners of the Walgreens wanted him prosecuted. And when she looked at what he had shoplifted, she saw bandages, socks, antiseptic, cotton balls, and then she looked at his feet and saw that his feet were bleeding through his shoes. So what did she do? She paid for the products, and she asked them to not charge him. They really wanted to charge him, but she convinced him not to. And what she did then brings tears to my eyes. She sat down with him, she took off his socks, she washed his feet, she dressed his wounds, and she said, "You cannot do this again. If you need help, you call me." And he had said, "I know I didn't have any money, I'm diabetic, I knew I had to get my feet clean, so I felt like I had no choice." She gave him her card and said, "You need anything, you call me." This is what officers do every day that is missed in this conversation. This weekend, I experienced it myself in my district. There was major issues on a lake that spans between Connecticut and Rhode Island. Over 70 trespassers were on private land, having parties, drinking, jumping off of cliffs. There was boats speeding. It was chaos. This is a town that doesn't have a police department, so we had to call the state police. And our state police is so low in numbers right now, and I'll remind you that 40% of them can retire, that it took nearly 45 minutes for them to show up because they were too busy taking care of somebody who was in a car accident. But when they showed up, 6 officers were there. They were there for us, they were there for the people in Voluntown. What are we going to do when we pass this law and every officer has said to me and everyone in the circle, they will leave or they cannot work under these conditions? These are the people that are doing the job telling us that. What other bill do we pass when the people that are affected say to us, we cannot do our jobs this way? We can't. That woman I told you about who cleaned that man's wounds, she said to her wife, "I have to put the house in your name. I'm not sure what's going to happen to Katie, our disabled daughter. Because if I, in essence, ask somebody something the wrong way, I can be sued for any reason at any time." That's what the police officers fear, and that's what I fear. We have asked our police in this state to step up and fight for everything. We have asked them to fight poverty through community policing. We have asked them to help with heroin addiction. We have asked them with helping with the homeless. We have asked them to now be medical personnel with giving Narcan. We have asked them to fight gang violence. We have asked them to be mentors. We have asked them to keep our schools safe, and never once have they said no. Never. And after talking to police officers and former police officers and state police and NCON police and people looking to get into police work, people just graduating, it is clear that there are social movements that are denigrating the remarkably hard work of our professionals that have kept our states and our safe state and our streets safe. These caring public servants haven't asked for anything. Respect, maybe. They haven't asked for gratitude. Again, I support common sense reform that strengthens, that does not vilify. Not too long ago, everyone in this circle nearly stood up and talked about how important police are when we all voted for the PTSD bill. I heard everyone praising them and the work that they do and the difficult situations that they encounter. And now we're looking to go after the 1%, but we're hurting the 99%. I am so sorry to say that this bill fails law enforcement. They are being failed by this political system, and they are being held, in my opinion, as scapegoats for our failed policies here. They're not risking another election. They're risking that their names be added to the 21,000 line-of-duty deaths on the police memorial in Washington, D.C. I believe that our local police deserve better than what's in this bill with qualified immunity. Connecticut deserves better than what's here in qualified immunity. And I just want to say to law enforcement, God bless our men and women in blue and your families. Thank you.
Thank you.